Welcome back to the Resupply with me, Guy Next Door.
Me, DK.
And me, Than.
Bringing you your weekly double tap of all things Space Marines and Laser Force. What up, boys? We're back. The whole crew is back together.
The whole crew. Well, most of the crew, anyway.
Yeah.
DK still has a touch of the Kiwi AIDS, so I'm going to go ahead and blame you for that one, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the way today has gone so far, I wouldn't blame you. Just heap some shit on. It's been an average day, but that's okay, because now we get to talk about Laser Force.
Those days unfortunately happen, and they happen with startling frequency at the moment. So yeah.
After this podcast is wrapped, I'm gonna go and eat some candy that I found at the bottom of my backpack, which has a little bit of grit on it, but that's okay. It's one of those days. Grit candy day.
Provides much essential roughage, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I do enjoy the general optimism of the Kiwi demeanor that a shitty day is described as quote average, implying that above average is usually how the days go in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet as over here.
I mean, that is fairly accurate. You know, most days in New Zealand are pretty goddamn fantastic.
Yeah, like on those days, the candy is grit free. You know, the sun shines. It's all great.
Sounds pretty good.
But yeah, so you missed the last couple we did, DK, where we got to wrangle Thunder at the last minute.
Last minute.
Yeah, so sorry. Apparently trying to coordinate between 4 different time zones on several different continents isn't always the most convenient for getting the whole crew together. Who knew?
Yeah.
And it's super weird. You know, I mean, come on. We managed to wrangle Wombat into this with you, you know, so what was your fucking problem?
Well, it was my mom's birthday, so leave me alone.
Oh, that's a decent one.
Oh, now I have guilt. Not really.
Fuck the haters.
Look, speaking of haters, we'll get into it in a second, but
oh boy.
why don't one of you guys give us a quick reminder of you know, dates for nationals and whatnot, because, you know, I never know what they are.
Well, why would you know? I mean, you're only organizing the damn thing.
Yeah, so here's the thing.
It's only at your site.
I take credit for organizing it. Demi Hawk from our site is more or less organizing it. So.
Oh, so basically you're just the face and the voice of the
organizational
aspects of it.
He's absolutely the brains in conjunction with, you know, you and Beans and everyone else that I hit up for advice.
I can roll with that.
Yeah, but yeah, what are the dates?
Well, according to the rough estimates that I have on my Google Flight Tracker and everything else, it would appear that it's going to be July 20th through 24th of 2020.
That's a lot of 20s. I can't wait, man. We've started rolling with some training.
Oh, and hang on. Let's just be clear, because we just said the dates. The tournament is in Auckland, New Zealand. For those of you that just caught the dates and are like, hey, that sounds like that would be fantastic to go to, and I have not heard of this yet. It's in Auckland, New Zealand, July 20th to 24th, 2020.
Come down and hang out with a bunch of weird Kiwis. I'm sure you won't regret it, probably.
You're totally going to regret it, but in the best ways. Ways possible.
If you don't come, you'll definitely get FOMO. It's
100%.
Going to happen. I mean, it happens anyway, but you know. But yeah, so speaking of the haters, somebody this week put up a post on the Facebook Laser Force tournaments page or forum group. I'm not sure which one, but
one of the two doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they brought up a
new game that is coming with the next software release for Laser Force. And now this is only one of like 7 or 8 new games that are going to be in the new software, which, okay, that's cool. But it has messed with, as Maniac describes it, our perfect angel of SM5. And I don't I don't quite know what to do with this, that our perfect angel of SM5 has been sullied in this way.
It hasn't been sullied. To be clear, they have not changed SM5 in any way, shape, or form. This is a new game format that uses SM5 as the template and also adds an additional kind of wrinkle. So it's not as though SM5 has been undone in the new software update or anything like that. So let's not panic here.
Too late.
Get all our panties up in a wad.
I've already got my grab bag. I'm halfway out the door to go into hiding because, you know, don't mess with my Space Marines, you jerks.
But if we didn't have some, you know, at least some feigned outrage about the whole thing, this pod would not be anywhere near as interesting. So we're going to at least continue with the at least feigned outrage while we, you know, discuss the blending, the unholy union of Space Marines 5 and Zone. Which, you know, shout out to all of our, you know, former Zone players that are now playing on Laser Force gear, especially you guys in Perth. We love you.
Yeah, you guys are not doing great for our outreach efforts and expanding the audience of the Resupply here.
I know we're definitely setting us back a few years, decades.
I don't understand it, so I don't like it.
Exactly.
What
is this hippie happy bullshit of motherfucking base bullshit in my SM5? What the fuck is this bullshit?
So what?
Hashtag build the wall.
So actually, though, coming off the, well, we're having a look at the description that was on there. It does look like, it looks exactly like that, right? A Frankenstein version of SM5 and Zone or Force Field.
Yeah.
Z-game.
Yes. So the description that I have in hand here is that everything else works like SM5. It's just the base getting feature that is more like Zone. So each time you shoot a base, you lose 500 points. But after the third shot, you get 3,501 points. So you get a net gain of 2,001. So it actually doubles the amount of points that you get from a base. But there's a risk reward there because if your base runner is interrupted, you're losing either 500 or 1,000 points. And if somebody deactivates you while you're in the midst of getting a base, they are going to get an additional 250 points on top of the 100 that you get for tagging them.
Because my favorite part of Dead Aim is when somebody shoots me halfway through getting a base. That's the thing that I love.
Dead Aim and the Zone emulator. There are few feelings better than just watching the sheer sadness and anger on one of your good friends' faces when they just are laying into a base and you're like, nope, you're not getting it. I'm like, fuck, I just lost a bunch of shots or points or something, depending on what kind of game we're playing.
Yeah, Dead Aim, that there is definitely something very, very satisfying for somebody that, you know, has to put, you know, max shots into a base and you hit them after shot 4 or 5 and
I'll eventually wait until shot 5. If I have the opportunity, I will make sure that they get the maximum screw over possible.
Yeah, and then they just and they look, and if they see you, just that complete look of like, are you fucking kidding me? Did you really just do that? You fucking did that. You fucking whore.
I've seen many people quit out of just like leave the arena after the salt level was too high from getting shot whilst trying to get a base in Dead Aim. So yeah, it'd be it's not something that I'm excited about implementing into a Space Marines game, to be fair. Yeah, what are your guys' initial thoughts on it?
So,
well, not too much of a mystery what your guys' initial thoughts are. Maybe I have a nuanced take, but go ahead, Than.
Yeah, so I mean, all feigned outrage aside, yeah, I mean, SM5 Classic is not going away.
No.
SM5 Classic is not.
Just SM5, no Classic. Just SM5.
We have to. Okay, fine.
Yeah, this ain't a Bitcoin fork, all right? God damn it.
So SM5 isn't going away. You know, it's not going away as the tournament format. It's still going to be our perfect angel that we do all the things with. tournament wise, it's fine. Do I think that there are some interesting tactical things with SM5Z? Sure. I also think that game, more than normal SM5, we'll just call it that, is going to be a lot more arena dependent for how well or terribly it plays.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Like a maze like Detroit. Let's just throw Detroit out there with where the resupply spots are in relation to the bases. You've 90% of the time got somebody just chilling very near the bases there, and to get targets, it's one hit, wait 2 seconds, two hit, wait 2 seconds, third hit. So it's 6 seconds to get a base. So you're going to tell. So you've got to be essentially unseen or have your team hitting them so hard that they're not paying attention to you for 6 seconds while you get your base, and then it's 30 seconds before anybody else can get it again, and they're still and defensively their position's still right there over the base. So I think Detroit, just as a specific example, would be a really potentially frustrating game to play that with.
It's funny because I was actually going to bring up Detroit as an example of a field where I think this would actually be kind of a great variation on it because of that specific element of how much it does kind of become about base denial and things like that, because Detroit has kind of flirted with that kind of idea before and has put a lot of emphasis on things like defending the base, and that last 60 seconds, if people don't have their bases, that can be a really crazy part of the game in Detroit. It didn't happen quite as much at Nationals as I was anticipating / fearing, because I think people kind of wised up to that at the end, but I actually think that could be a much more interesting variation in a field like Detroit's as being kind of the perfect setup for that type of game format.
I didn't say that it wouldn't be interesting. I said that it could be potentially super, super frustrating. Those are two different things, and in a Venn diagram, there's some overlap.
True, because I would take a field like, well, back in the days when SAC still had a field, but assuming we ever get to play that field again or something like that, this kind of variation, if we kept the bases in their old configuration, I would think would actually have almost no bearing on the game because of how easy it was to get the bases.
Right.
Because they're all in pretty well covered positions. None of them are attackable from upstairs, and they're pretty isolated as far as the field goes. The joke that I made on the forum was, well, at least in that kind of situation, it would have given Fredo a legitimate reason to stay downstairs and bum hunt the entire game rather than ever come upstairs, because at least he could pick off people going for their base runs.
Right.
Well, but the flip side there is that with the 30-second cooldown after base destruction, it's 6-person teams at 30 seconds per base. Okay, so you're 3 minutes just in base cooldowns after they're destroyed, on top of the 6 seconds per base cooldowns just on the hits. So I mean, you're at 3.5 minutes of the game where that's all in quotes that you're doing is
true. You do have to get the timing down a little bit more, and yeah, that is true.
So I mean, let's say it's interesting. It's potentially frustrating depending upon the field, but on the much bigger picture, with the amount of zone sites that Laser Force is snapping up, and they've been doing a ridiculous job over the last few years of going into sites and replacing Zone with Laser Force. From a system sales perspective, and I'm sure this has been something that has been requested. Maybe not necessarily this specifically, but I'm sure things like this have been requested by new customers or people that want to be customers, but don't necessarily want to give up some of the game types that they're used to. Or,
yeah, at least on that end, I would definitely applaud Chris and the development team at Laser Force for kind of working on a way to bridge essentially their flagship product with something else that other sites are going to be more familiar with when they convert over. So it's a little bit more of a easy transition into, look, here's what you're used to. Here's a lot of the new stuff from the game format. See how it plays for you.
Yeah. So at the the aspect of the reality is Laser Force is a business. They like making money. And we like them making money because then they stay in business and we can keep playing our Perfect Angel of SM5. From that aspect, anybody that has a genuine issue with them having done this basically just needs to shut the fuck up and get over it. This is
nothing has been taken away. This is purely additive.
Now one thing that I would be actually kind of curious to try, and I mentioned this on the Laser Force Facebook group. So the Zone bases, but with SM4, because SM4 is such a weirdly semi-broken game to start with.
Yeah.
A version of it that's doing 7.5 minute Space Marines 4 with the base cooldowns after destruction set at like 10 or 15 seconds, because otherwise, you're literally spending half the game dealing with the bases, and that seems stupid. But SM4 with the Zone bases, I would actually be genuinely interested to try that. I think that would add a depth to SM4 that right now I think we can all acknowledge just doesn't fucking exist.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I would also be intrigued on that. And it's interesting that you noted that too with the base cooldowns and stuff. That I think is one area where you might be able to toy around with this a little bit and maybe develop something that's a little bit more workable here than the 30-second cooldown, because 30 seconds is a ton of time.
Yeah, it's huge
in a Space Marines game.
Yeah.
So you could. I do like the idea of having to space out your shots a little bit, because it does kind of alert the other team that, hey, somebody's getting a base, and you have an opportunity to cancel that out. So I'm just wondering if flipping a little bit around with the point values, or with the cooldown on the bases, if that might make it something that's a little bit more viable overall. Because I certainly do agree that Space Marines 5 is as close to about a perfect game as you can get. I've actually never really hated the idea, though, of somehow trying to put a little bit more emphasis on stuff like base protection and base runs as a more strategic aspect of the game. So I don't necessarily think of it as a bad innovation. I'm not willing, certainly, to switch over to some new variant of SM5 that incorporates these zone principles just yet. But I think it is something that I would want to look at and experiment with, and probably maybe run a couple of games of it a week, if I actually had a site to play at.
Yeah, that's always the trick, is actually, having somewhere to play and do that.
Yeah. So who better to discuss this than two players who don't currently have a home site?
and honestly, like from a we've had the discussion multiple times across the 50 plus episodes that we've done of this stupid little podcast, about trying about how do we bridge the gap to bring in new players? Is there something else that we can do? Because everybody acknowledges that while SM5 is the pinnacle of team-based laser tag, it comes with a very steep barrier to entry. If you have to have a certain level of comfort with a bunch of basic mechanical things within the system before you can even think about being comfortable and competent with SM5. Maybe a mod, an SM4Z does become that that more entry level tournament game, because SM4, it is a more basic game, and that whole not being able to die thing certainly has its appeal for newer players. But if there is the base getting strategy element of it, maybe that does become something that can be looked at as kind of a almost a training wheels isn't quite the right word, because they are completely different games, but something to get people into something that's a little more competitive without getting thrown into the complete deep end that is SM5.
Yeah, because I think the advantage there is you're not adding to a game that's already as complex as any laser tag game is out there, because adding the base wrinkles to SM5 makes already the most complex game that we have probably even more complicated. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to be as appealing for people who are just getting used to a new system or something like that. But I think with SM4 that definitely has possibilities, because then you get used to kind of the team element of having differential positions, but you still kind of keep that base defense sort of alignment, which actually would be an interesting kind of wrinkle for SM4, because you really don't otherwise have a lot of incentive to keep static positions the way that you do in SM5, where rather than its base defense, though, it's resupply defense.
Yeah, well, so for me, like, the key difference between the two game formats is where the focus of defense is, right? So in a SM5, for the most part, you're focused on defending a resupply, and the bases are kind of whatever. Whereas in like in the zone format, it seems that bases are incredibly important to kind of defend. So
yeah,
yes.
If not everything, there's certainly a lot.
So I think you're right. Like if you switch out, if you got rid of the need to be defending, because you can't. I'm not sure if you could really defend both. You know what I mean? Like so I think that people would still not be super concerned about defending the base. But yeah. So if you can remove the element of having to worry about which one to defend, which you would do in a SM4. And the other thing as well is that if you do, switch away from your focus of attacking the resupply versus trying to get bases, it would, in my mind, extend the game length out quite a bit. And so you'd still get eliminations, but maybe not as often. So if you did switch to that shorter format SM4, you can look to have bigger tournaments, essentially.
Yeah. Although I was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but semi-serious when I made that comment to you, saying that, well, if you eliminate the other team, you don't need to do base runs.
Yeah, well.
So, if anything, right, there's almost kind of an extra incentive to eliminate the other teams if you're having difficulty getting bases, because assuming that you still get awarded the bases automatically, that makes for even a kind of stronger elim bonus, because now with the bases worth twice as much and you're taking zero risk in getting them, because you're not going to lose that 500 points each time.
But I
definitely see what you're saying, but I think the incentive to eliminate the other team is still going to be easily as strong,
maybe, but
if not even stronger.
Not all, like Than said, not all arenas are created like the same, right? So in some arenas, it's much harder to get those elims. So incentive or no, people for the most part, I would imagine, are trying to kill the other team's resupply. And so, yeah, I mean, whilst, yes, there is a greater incentive to achieve that goal, some sites probably won't allow for that. Or at least, it becomes much harder to achieve that.
For sure.
Yeah, and so we should probably discuss a couple of the other wrinkles associated to the game. So one is just the kind of mechanics of, can you actually get the bases? How much does this change people's strategy? But even beyond that, there's a couple more basic things that it would do. Is that, number one, it eliminates kind of the incentive to do any sort of group base runs or something like that. Like, it's not uncommon now to send the resupply to get their bases together, so that way they don't have to split up. But if there's a cooldown in between base destruction, you really can't do that anymore. So that's already flipping that pretty significantly. And I mean, some teams and in some arenas might extend even beyond that. It might be the resupply plus a heavy, so you have some kind of defense to go get the bases. Well, now that completely alters that dynamic altogether. But the other big one that got brought up that I think would be a definite and massive change to the game is it would effectively eliminate being able to reset off of bases as a legitimate strategy for keeping people down, because now it's no longer worth it if you're going to lose 500 points a pop.
That's right.
I don't care how badly you have to keep the other team down. That's going to add up pretty quickly in terms of coming back to bite you.
The only way that would make sense at all would be if you were a 3-hit and you did it and you definitely got the missile off. Like, that would be the only way to cancel that back out.
Or
but that again sort of negates a lot of the effectiveness of the missile in the first place. It gives you kind of less incentive to want to go for that versus, say, just like resetting off your own teammate or something. Because you have to be sure to get the missile just to make up for the points you're going to lose. So you really don't get anything extra. The missile's supposed to be extra.
Unless you missiled the medic.
Oh
no, I'm definitely, that was literally the only thing that I could come up with. It's like, okay, this would bring you basically plus 100 points because they would lose the 100 points for getting missiled.
Right.
And going plus 100 for a missile, doesn't necessarily seem like really a winning strategy.
No.
So we'll say it all but eliminates that from the game, which on the one hand, I think you can make the argument of, well, okay, then it does become a little bit more reliant on your teammates to say, hey, there's somebody else here, somebody else needs to reset them, or I need to be able to reset off of you. So you can't just do things in isolation as well. So I think there's an argument to be made for that. On the other side of it, you could say that, well, that kind of further weakens the position of the one-hits, because now they don't have the possibility, if they're, say, caught in the central tower in Detroit or on a base run in some other field, and there's a 3-hit who's just stalking them, that they can't just now keep them down kind of at will if they have that base to reset off of. So I could kind of see the argument there from both sides, but that certainly would change the game in a lot of ways. I know some people are really big fans of using bases to reset. It's definitely a useful strategy in places. I can't say that I probably use it nearly as much as a lot of people, but I'm not going to say that's not a useful strategy.
You don't have a site to play out. Of course you don't.
Oh, yeah, just put the boot in.
A dick. Drive to San Antonio, play some laser tag, and eat a dick there.
No.
So, but you're right, like that, and I've heard it from people in the community. That's what kind of makes Laser Force as a site great, is the fact that you can reset, right? And so taking away,
you still reset off people.
Yeah, of course you can, but if you can reset off a base, it's even better. And it doesn't happen often, depending on how your arena is set up, but.
That again is very arena dependent.
Yeah, but I mean, it happens often enough that you kind of, not want to give it up,
It would change the aforementioned Detroit because of that whole neutral base angle that they have going on in the central tower.
Yeah, so then the game would be even more static in that site.
Yeah.
Okay. So other thoughts on this kind of dynamic? So to recap, obviously it changes the strategy behind bases. It kind of eliminates the reset off of bases kind of incentive, and kind of gets rid of the idea of team-based runs. You kind of now have to either do several team base runs, because that I guess would be the other thing too, is that as much as you can't have everybody get the base at once, you kind of might need to go as a group, so that way you can give the person who's getting the base some cover in other sorts of cases. So it certainly adds other wrinkles to the game.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm just really intrigued. Well, I'm really intrigued to play any kind of laser tag, as you guys well know. But I think it would be something worth experimenting with a little bit to see if there is some kind of workaround that maybe someday we'd consider. Because as much as I've said, SM5 is as close to a perfect game as possible, I've always been a fan of the idea that I think a medic should get 1 life back every time they do a life boost. That's about the only truly good fix I think is in for the game. But I've always thought that kind of adding something around base defense or some kind of incentive in that area wouldn't necessarily be a negative change. So I'm kind of intrigued by this.
In Force Field, are you able to reset?
No, because there's no reset in Zone.
Right? So they didn't bring it across. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, if you watch the Aussie titles and stuff like that, that's why you see players get deactivated and not run away, which is the most jarring thing for me watching Laser Force. I'm just like, run away!
Yeah.
You're gonna get reset, you idiot.
So.
Oh no! Wait, no, you're not.
So does that mean that with zone sites that are converting to lasers or to force, are they more likely to have their bases set up where you can actually hold a resupply, or not necessarily? Because I haven't really played that many zone sites, so I don't really kind of know if they've got it set up for that, where you can kind of hole up. Because that's the only thing I could kind of think of with Force, right? Is with this new game format, is if you were going to hold, you would hold an area where the opposing base is, if you could, or where yours was. I don't really know.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. Again, zone arenas are going to vary a bit. They don't have always a kind of cookie cutter format, but it seems that in a lot of cases, zone bases, at least the better designed arenas, are set up so that the base areas are kind of a primary focus and hence a little bit more defensible.
Right.
Yeah, but typically zone bases. They also typically, or at least in the States, they typically play with base evac rules. So if you're deactivated while you're in a base, you have to leave the base. They're not necessarily set up well for resupply spots. They're just set up so that there's clear delineations for where you have to come in and go out from.
That's true. I'd forgotten about that.
Because they
aren't
allowed to...
and thank you, inter-system player, for clearing that up.
But because they aren't allowed to stay in the base?
If you get deactivated, you have to leave the kind of immediate base area. So there's a marked off area saying that if you're put down, you have to cross this line and you can't come back until you're reactivated.
Weird. Okay.
Well, basically, it's to give somebody a fair chance if they've put you down to then actually score the destruction on the base, so they can't just camp right on top of you.
Do they have to hit it
put you back down?
Because they hit it once every 3 seconds? Did you say 2 or 3 seconds?
I think it's 2 seconds.
2 seconds.
And that's got to be consecutive. Can't work I shoot it and then I come back later and then I shoot it again.
It's got to be consecutive.
Okay, sweet.
I think you're allowed to miss, but you can't hit anything else in the meantime.
Right. That's interesting. So yeah, I don't know. Like you say, it's a different game format. It's not Space 5. It's just shares common traits, really common traits. But yeah.
So our review is Steve's not a fan. Fan thinks it might be good for SM4. DK is a little bit more intrigued. If we had to sum things up, I guess.
I really do like it for a different. I like it for SM4 because the stakes are a lot lower in SM4.
I definitely do as well.
Yeah, it gives you something. It gives you more of an incentive to work as a team in SM4 rather than what it is now. Everyone goes and does their own thing until they run out of shots, and then you whip some shit at your ammo for not resupplying you quick enough. But yeah, would be quite good.
There are some other aspects I think would be intriguing too. So even if you don't keep this, I kind of like the idea of if we could somehow incorporate it into Space 5 at least, of giving players a bonus for interrupting someone else's base run. So maybe you don't change anything else, like have players lose points for shooting the base and then give it back to them at the end. But I think that'd be kind of cool if you got, 1 or 200 bonus points for deactivating somebody before they destroy a base.
Again, I think it shifts the focus from what the game is, though. Like, to me, the game is about killing the other team, right? And the base is, really, the base is there to give the commander special points. And maybe the resupply power boosts. But, I don't know. I think if you put more emphasis on playing the base, it just takes a little bit away from killing the resup. At least in my mind, it does. Yeah, I don't know.
We might just have to agree to disagree on that one.
Mm.
What's this? What's this drama within the resupply? A disagreement? A difference of opinion?
Oh my god!
No. This can't possibly be. We are simpatico on everything,
including scheduling.
This is why we don't have as many hits as First Take. We need to get a little bit more uncivil with one another. Yeah. So I'm gonna need you to Stephen A it up a little bit over there.
Oh, what? thing, and then a thing, but I fucking hate that guy.
You have got to be a crazy man, guy next door. You do not understand the significance of the bases in SM5. I don't know how many times I need to get into this, but you cannot succeed as a team if you can't get your base runs down.
He's a bad man. So
I got nothing to follow that, so I'm just gonna let you guys go.
Sports. So did you guys, did you guys hear anything about any of the other games that were kind of being tested at the moment?
I have not, so maybe we should get, say, a Rusty or Trash or one of the other Brisbane people, since I know they've been testing some of the new games to come on sometime soon and tell us about these state secrets that are coming out.
Maybe they're on NDA again, with
Gen 8.
Yeah.
That was pretty entertaining.
We've had moments in the past of trying to create games. Like I think one of the guys here, a couple of us, worked on some Dragon Ball Z kind of games based on the D&D like format. And back in those days, we're like, it's way too complex. But with touchscreen technology, you never know. You might be able to implement some really cool things. I hope they kind of, work with the equipment with some of these new games, because it's there, so why wouldn't you?
That would be cool. But some of the new game formats they've come up with have, I think, been pretty innovative. Like, I think Color Conquest was a fantastic kind of premiere that they rolled out.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even that long ago. That was, 2 or 3 years ago they came out with that?
It's an interesting
I don't
game.
know. I didn't have a site to play it at.
How's that boot feel?
That game, get wrecked.
It's fun to play. But unless you have a big group of people who more or less know what they're doing, the public kind of, at least that I've seen, don't understand it or don't see it as anything other than, wait, why am I a different color now?
Yeah, but some of that in general, usually comes back to poor explanations.
Yeah, that's true for anything you're trying to bring in something other than the standard game for Gen Pub. Is people need a base familiarity with the system and things like that. The real pro to the Laser Force system is that you do have so many other capabilities, but it requires, one, that people are already familiar with the basic game, and two, that you have either members or preferably employees at the site who are going to not only push these games for them to become sort of habits among new members, but also to explain them and promote them effectively.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But there's an element that comes down to that, which is some people just, like, if you're stepping into a Laser Force or Laser Tag arena for the first time, your expectation is I just run and shoot someone. right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is always going to be there for Gen Pub, but
True.
I think it's true of most people who develop even a kind of modest interest in it, and might be something that they go do more than a couple of weekends or something. If they become aware that there are other features out there, that can really be a marketing point. And it was certainly what got me coming back, and I think that's true for a lot of other players as well, that the basic game is really fun, but there's actually other things we can do with this. You can add more complexity, you can add more skills to this. Wow, I want to get involved in that because this is already fun. I only imagine that it's going to be even better.
Yeah, it sort of taps into people's like crazy competitive sides.
Well, especially with stuff like the achievements and all that, because there's just a ton of psychological and market research to indicate how effective that is in promoting repeat play. If DLCs and stuff like that are any indication from video games, people want to cross off those achievements. If it's there, people are going to want to get it. So if that's well marketed, I think you're going to develop enough of a kind of interested customer base to get that stuff in there.
I think centers would sort of do well to kind of promote that side of things a bit more, because you're right, like with achievements in gaming now, like people are all about their gamer score and shit when they game online. So when they do the video games, and I don't know, it might just our site might be an anomaly, but fuck, our site might just be an anomaly. That's what I'm trying to say.
There you go.
But it seems like they don't sort of draw too much attention to the stuff that would keep people a little more invested in coming back on a semi-regular basis.
I don't think that makes it an anomaly at all. I think that is probably true of most sites. I just think it is a potentially overlooked area of marketing and revenue that sites could tap into, and something that I think is much more capable with LaserForce than other kinds of stuff on the market.
Yeah.
Well, if I can put out a free advertisement for LaserForce Corporate, put me on the payroll. Come on, I'm doing free promotion for you here.
So I mean, we've kind of stumbled our way as we roll through topics, because we love talking shit about lasers. This comes back to the the owner / management perception of the risk reward for having members and advanced play. The risk reward is sure, if you're able to cultivate a solid member base, they're going to get you or at least the idea is they're going to get you consistent revenue on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. The risk on that is that, as I know all of us have seen at various times with our home sites, whether original or adopted in my case, and we've heard it from pretty much every other advanced player within the scene at different sites. When you've got advanced players and they're not necessarily managed well, you can run into situations where they're scaring off your general public players and making that experience for your general public not fun, not something that they want to come back and experience again. And so there's this this whole risk reward thing of, okay, do we want to take the risk of encouraging this repeat / advanced play with all this stuff when it does add an additional layer of complexity to the overall management of the facility and the player base. And I mean that this is a subject that if we go down this rabbit hole, this is an entirely other episode, and I think we may have actually done this episode in the past. I know we've stumbled our way into this a few times.
Managed well is the operative phrase there.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything that's gonna apply to in the business. If X isn't managed well, it could actively become a detriment rather than an asset to the business.
Accurate. But there's the from the owner management argument side of it, there's enough, the argument goes that there's enough complexity within the business managing your general public and your parties and your groups and keeping all that, as you think it should be, without adding the extra layer of, now we have these advanced players that we have to manage with all this other stuff. So yeah, it's challenging. It can definitely be done. We definitely have examples of that within the community. I mean, I think all the Perth sites at this point would be a great example. Brisbane would be a great example. Auckland to an extent would be an example. Sacramento at times before that site went away was an example. So
yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you bring up Perth too, because I think that's another kind of way in which getting Zone size converted over to Laserforce could be a real asset, because Zone has been relatively good about kind of cultivating a member base and stuff like that, and integrating that in as a key part of the business.
Yeah. So there's, this is, it's an entire rabbit hole, that, I mean, we could do a whole series just on proper management of your members, and
I guess like
how to keep them.
Topic for another time.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, like, none of us currently run a laser force site, so
accurate.
Yeah.
It's
the last thing you want
in the business of providing unprofessional business advice to people. So
that's right. I'm not even wearing any pants.
That's kind of a you problem.
That's definitely not. That's definitely a you problem and not an us problem.
That's more of my neighbor's problem.
Only if you've got the windows open.
Which I do.
Damn it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's new games. In summary, new games. I'm interested to see what those new games are going to be like, because it may, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my members night consists mostly of Space Marines. Whether or not that's
Definitely
the same
true.
for you guys, I don't know.
I would say when we still did member nights in SAC, we almost always had like a warm-up game as we started getting people there. Maybe we didn't have enough for Space Marines or something.
We do the same.
So it would not be uncommon for us to play Dead Aim or Deathmatch or Game or Color Conquest or something like that, just to kind of warm up. And maybe at the end of the night, if you start losing some people, it's like, well, we still want to play a little bit more. Maybe you play like a D&D at the end of the night or something like that to just kind of keep things moving. So even if you are playing mostly Space Marines 5, which, let's be real, we all should.
Yes,
all
we
the
should.
Time.
All the time.
But there's probably some other cases where you'll have the opportunity to test out new things. And I think Rusty made a really good case on one of the podcasts where he came on, that playing the other games is never necessarily a bad thing. There are usually other skills that you can incorporate from other games that might get you to see things in a new way in Space Marines 5 that maybe you didn't before. So even if you're not playing all Space Marines all the time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sort of lose a step on playing that game relative to other things. But that, again, goes to a larger conversation about specialization versus generalization. There's all kinds of, sports research that goes into that.
I mean, at its base level, laser tag is still about shooting people. So the faster you can do that, generally the better you play, regardless of the game format. So,
generally speaking.
All right, fellas. We'll leave that there for the day.
Seems like
And
a
as we
good
learn
idea.
more about the new game formats, we'll come back and talk more about those.
That's right. I mean, we could speculate, like we do, with no facts.
We're really good at it. We're really good at it.
But until we have more facts to come back to, we'll leave it there. Hopefully, we can maybe have a conversation. Yeah, like you say, with one of the Brisbane guys or someone who has access to what's going on at the moment and get their hot take on it. But for now, I'm gonna go and eat some more gritty bag candy. I've been Guy Next Door.
I've been Stephen A. Smith.
And I've been Fan.
Always remember to backtrack, kids. We will see you next week.